suppose I'm going to take you all the way back to my childhood. So, I was born and raised in Newcastle. If listeners out there know, Newcastle upon Tyne is a really small city in the northeast of England. And I would say my natural sort of stirring to clinical psychology and actually becoming a therapist comes from my family of origin, as of many therapists in the world. I think I was trained really as a caregiver by my family environment. Not that they did it intentionally, but being the younger of two sort of sisters, two siblings, and I was raised by my paternal grandmother, who's now deceased, but I was always very drawn to caregiving, very nursing. I had a very natural mothering quality to myself, even like as a 6-7-year-old little girl. And I think so naturally was drawn to caring. But what really put me into the human psychology in terms of treating pathology and treating the mental health conditions we have, personality disorders, was I grew up with seeing alcohol being misused in my family, and I think when one is raised in that environment, you're naturally kind of I think children, because they're so intuitive, they're naturally, aren't they? And they naturally pick up that actually, this person, one of my parents, was using alcohol throughout and very dependent on alcohol. And of course, we know that with alcohol, it disinhibits the ego. So like lots of unfortunate, negative energy comes out, and we know that lots of abuse happens through using alcohol. So I think for me, that was my drive. Like, it was my mission, I think, not knowing it then as a child, but subconsciously, I think I sort of made a life script for myself and thought, makes sense. This is not right. What's happening? And I'm confused growing up. And I really want to know why people do the things that they do.
Yes. So it really feeds into your curiosity, and your it comes from a place of genuine curiousness. You're wanting to learn about people and support them in their journey. And I suppose when I hear you speak, I think about how many of us within the helping professions have had similar experiences where we've from a very early age, we've learned how to take care of ourselves and to look out for those people around us. And I could only speak for myself, but when we know that it's not always a safe environment, we learn to repress part of our needs and to lean into supporting other people. And I suppose one of the concerns I've had over the years with working with my supervisees is how unless this is brought into full awareness, we run the danger of acting out our scripts, and that's how we get our own egos stroked by helping other people. And thankfully, the training that you've had and I've had, and the chartered psychologists have had, and others that have gone through such rigorous training, like the psychotherapists, we're invited to look at ourselves and to examine our process. And this is why they're so rigorous. And thankfully, we don't end up acting out our own scripts, as you said, onto our clients.
Absolutely. The way that you've summarized this, Matt, I really like the words that you've used, and the word and I'll just add another word. You're so right that we can get drawn in. A lot of therapists do come from abusive backgrounds or backgrounds of, just learning to ignore one's own needs, but take care of other people's feelings.
Yes.
And And I think we all have those narcissistic wounds at certain degrees, I think, like it's on the spectrum. But you're so, and I would add, you're so right about the training that prepares us. But even with my, assistant psychologists that I've worked with and trainees, And I hold myself so accountable to this. And I hope consciously I'm doing as much work as that. Even after the training, it's a lifelong examination. Even therapists with like yourself and me, who've had years of experience behind us, we still need to examine ourselves and those ego strokes we get when our patients give us feedback.
Yes. You know, it's interesting because over the years, I've been in the helping professions now, I dare say, for almost 30 years, and I've trained as a counsellor. And for that, it was required at the time to have a year of personal therapy. Then I went on to train as a psychotherapist, which was another 4 consecutive years of at least 40 hours of personal therapy each year for that time. And then training as a psychologist, it was another year of personal therapy. And so the process continues. And still, I would say that none of us are the finished articles. We're all works in progress, right?
Absolutely. And the cycle, I don't know if I think you knew, Matt, didn't you, that I actually practice, my primary approach is psychoanalysis.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you did that. Did you do that in your psychotherapy training?
I trained, I trained as a transactional analysis, which is an integrative approach, you know, that leans heavily, or it's built heavily on psychoanalysis. So it's not pure psychoanalysis, it integrates different types of approaches.
Yes, and I think it integrates cognitive,
that's right. Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy and Gestalt therapy. It's this wonderful fusion. But, you know, it's like the person-centered approach. It's a very broad church. You know, people you know, bring in, often have had different trainings in the past before they enter into transactional analysis. So it's, you know, now, and I guess, well, I for myself, I call myself a pluralist or an integrationalist. You know, I just fuse in different approaches, and they actually lend themselves very well right across the helping professions.
Yes.
You know,
you're right.
Yeah.
It's a versatile tool, I think.
Yes. And I love this. This dovetails very nicely, Farah, into discussing your podcast, because one thing that really drew me, really caught my eye and imagination in speaking with you and writing with you, is that you take, in your podcast, you take popular children's fairy tales or stories, and you examine them through the lens of psychoanalysis. Would you say that's a fair description of your podcast and the premise behind it?
Yes, I would say that.
Yeah.
I think the challenge for me is because I was trained, because even with psychoanalysis, there are different branches. And I've been in object relations. So a couple of, just for listeners out there, if they're interested, a couple of names would be Donald Winnicott, who was a pediatrician. I think you...
Yes, good enough parenting.
That's right, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, mother. And then also Melanie Klein. I'm very Kleinian. So Melanie is the mother of object relations. She was an analyst. So I would say that's a fair description. And I think the challenge that I'm meeting every time I record my podcast episode with my co-host is how to translate complex psychological theory like psychoanalysis to the lay person, or to, you know, people who've not had that specialized training. It's how to,
Yes, and you do it so well. You know, in fact, you know, this is why I was drawn to transactional analysis. Eric Berne, the guy that started the movement, his whole intention was to demystify psychiatry and psychology, make it accessible to the layperson. And here you are, 2022, doing just that in a very, very entertaining way.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's important for us, right? It's the psychologists, because even in our ethical guidelines, you know, like, I mean, we don't look at them every day in our routine clinical practice, but we've had to really rigorously memorize what our ethical codes are.
Yes,
And
yes.
even in that phase, we have an obligation to disseminate our psychological knowledge and expertise across. Otherwise, society is not going to change. How are we going to change as a human species?
Yes, and so it's something that drives us in being able to disseminate this information and demystify what appears quite complex, but it can be broken down and it can be made accessible. Yeah, it's funny because I'm spending a lot of time now doing just that on Twitter, and I know we were talking not Twitter, on TikTok, making little TikTok videos, and people, of course, a lot of the younger people first jumped on TikTok, but it's astonishing now how a lot of the grown-ups and the professionals are getting into that space and using it to learn about ourselves and the world. And there's a captive audience. There's a captive audience there, and this is what really stimulates me about bringing it into spaces like that and teaching people. It's incredible the impact and the reach you can have.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I think, and it's not surprising to me when you say that, because the younger, I mean, I know you mentioned grown-ups, but I think, and of course, adults and grown-ups do use, you know, technology and different apps such as TikTok. But I think it would even, I'm just looking ahead to the future as well. My vision for psychology for the future is that our sort of the children now in the current generation, that they're going to go into this era.
Yes.
And you know, that they're going to grow up as young adults with their own set of psychological problems.
Yes, and especially having spent a couple of years in a pandemic, right? You know, which is going to, I think it's going to shape and define characteristics of this upcoming generation. And I don't know about you, Farah, but as a psychologist, I could see the writing on the wall at the beginning of the pandemic when we were being instructed to stay apart from each other. You know, and it's almost like, you know, just the psychology of touch, reaching out. And now, you know, 2 years have passed, and, you know, even those, I'm based now in Austria, and it was very customary to, when you went to a restaurant to meet a group of people, you would go around the table and hug and kiss each person. Yeah, but no more. You know, do you see how culturally there's a paradigm shift? Long-standing traditions are being deeply affected and reshaped.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that's actually sad to hear, because it's very customary for the Austrian culture to, you know.
Yes. But more broadly, I mean, you know, we spent a lot of time in the UK, you and I, and, you know, handshaking is very normal and common, and, you know, and now, I mean, I don't spend much time in the UK anymore, but to reach out and to touch somebody's hands, people are going to have second thoughts about that.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think maybe, sorry, you're going to say something, Matt.
Yeah, just one last, I mean, it just made me think how, from a psychological point of view, the importance of that, because we're very good at as transactional analysis, we call it stroking, you know, recognizing another person through, you know, psychologically, just through saying their name or giving them eye contact. But it's an extra source of validation when we touch somebody. You know, existentially, it's like saying, we see you, we feel you, we know you are there, and that means something. And
no, it does.
Yeah.
I think I can hear what you're saying. I mean, human touch is so important. You know, we can even die without, we know that from babies, from holding young. But I think I'm going to challenge this a little bit, if I might.
Go for it. Yeah, of course.
Because I'm just thinking, so I'm not negating the human touch is so important, because physical intimacy, affection, and all of that.
Yes.
But I'm just wondering, actually, as now that we're sitting and really pondering over it, it's not so much a comment or a conclusion even that I've come to. I mean, we can't ever come to conclusions, but it's more of a question, such as, now with the pandemic, now with all these shifts, human touch is becoming more of a rarity now. So does that mean now, as a human species and in our work as psychologists, do we now have to touch somebody more with our words, with our facial expression? And what do you know what I mean? Do we? What?
I do. Yes. We're very mindful about touch when working with certain people with certain backgrounds, like people who've experienced trauma in their past. You know, we've been trained to be very careful as to whether we touch a person for risk of re-traumatizing or something being misunderstood. And I suppose now with COVID-19 and the pandemic, I think we need to be more aware of the implication of touch and the respect of boundaries, and finding ways to reach people, as you say, through other means. Touching them in psychologically, emotionally, in different ways. Yes.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the tips that I learned very well, this is a long time ago, but in my early years of practice, and please share your thoughts on this as well, Matt, I'd love to hear, is that one of the tools that I use with somebody I'm working with in my consulting room, who I've developed quite a strong therapeutic bond, and there's a lot of trust there's a lot of safety, and we've got to the point where we've been working maybe perhaps a year or two, even more, 3 years. I would think about it first and reflect before I say, because you have to think about what you're going to say. But even just saying to my patient, let's say they're sharing something deeply traumatic or deeply sad, or they're just really in a very vulnerable place, they're weeping. I've often said this to people, like, I actually feel like touching your hand right now, and I just being so immediate with my feelings, like, I want to reach out to you, but I know I can't. And then I ask, and then I ask, how does it feel hearing me say that? How does it, and even just knowing that the therapist wants to reach out, but they can't because of the boundaries, because of pandemic or other things, because it's not just the pandemic, it's our boundaries as well, isn't it, in therapy between.
Yes, absolutely. And it makes me think, funnily enough, I was just musing over this by myself last week, and said something very similar to a client, where, and I think my words were something like, I really would love to give you a hug right now. I know that that's not appropriate, and but I just want you to know that I'm here for you, and I want to let you know that I was very touched by what you just said. And the feedback I get, and I suppose especially as a male, I'm very, very mindful of the words that I use and the touch that I would use. And so I'm super sensitive around this issue, and I watch very carefully. And the feedback I get when I offer such words, it feels the same as being touched. It feels like a hug. Just the expression, the intention of offering that virtually.
Yeah, offering that affection, like you said, and things just popped in my mind. If we were to scan through an MRI scan and see what's happening in the brains when they hear those words, we'd be able,
yes.
There must be something going on.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure, and I'm sure some of our listeners and viewers with psychological backgrounds would be happy to testify. The research behind this, I've never really dived into it. I've seen a few documentaries, but I've seen how the scans show activity in the brain when presented with, with images or suggestions of touch. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel drawn. I know we don't have much time today, and so I feel drawn towards asking you more about your podcast, about its, where the idea come from, and how it's going for you, and what direction do you see it going in?
Okay, yeah. The idea was born, this is pre-pandemic. So pre-pandemic, I started to listen to, actually not just pre-pandemic, it was when the first lockdown happened, just before then, back in 2020, I think it was spring 2020.
Yes.
Yeah, and I came across a podcast called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. I don't know if you're aware of it.
I'm certainly aware of Harry Potter, and I read a few of the books, but I don't think I've read this one. And I'm not sure I've even seen the film.
Oh, right.
The Sacred Text.
Yeah, the Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. So basically, it's a podcast, and every week they kind of delve into Harry Potter's books.
Oh,
and
sorry. Yeah, I misunderstood. I thought it was the name of one of the books or the films. Right. Okay, it's the podcast name. Gotcha. Okay.
And I actually needed that, at that time. I was kind of, it was like the first sort of a hard hit working from home. At that point, I was, my role was as an assistant professor at a local university here. So I was teaching and training psychologists and supervising their research and so on and so forth. And I found that so deeply comforting, because my love of literature, just going back a little bit to the first question you asked me about how I came into psychology.
Yes.
I love words, I love literature and symbols like metaphor. And a lot of what we do, you and me, Matt, in the consulting room, when we, when we're offering therapy and a healing journey, is that it is a metaphor. Like, it's a story that people are telling their story and then retelling it, and it's a narrative. One's life is a narrative, and
yes,
isn't it?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So
yes,
isn't it? Understand the human experience. We actually do. I actually argue this very strongly, that in psychotherapy training and in psychology, back in our time, Matt, we didn't have this in our doctoral trainings, but I would say it would be a mandatory for me if I had any authority. I think one should be definitely trained in how to analyze literature and myth and symbolism, because that's the root to the understanding the human soul and psyche. How can you not?
Yes. Makes me think about, it makes me think about Eric Berne's teachings in transactional analysis, because he talked about script and how that's largely informed by, in the core developmental stages, by fairy tale, by stories, and we identify with certain characters, and so we develop an understanding of ourselves and the world through stories and fairy tale, and then we construct our own narratives, and we develop life plans, and they can play out. We decide on them very early, and then they can play out, but they fall out of awareness, but that story is still there, that narrative is still there, playing away in the background.
Absolutely, it is. And yeah, go on.
Oh no, there's so much, all these fireworks going off, there's so much I could say, but please, no, you speak.
Okay, thank you. Because you and me, I think, are so passionate. We want to keep kind of, contributing to the discussion. But I'm just mindful that, when you asked me about how the podcast, my podcast, was kind of, given birth to. So the love of literature and story, and actually using psychology as a tool to analyze and what the life lessons and messages are. So Roald Dahl, so my podcast looks at Roald Dahl's works. And that's just something that I thought, I'm going to start it this year with my co-host, and we're going to see how it goes. And I think that the Roald Dahl idea was more of a joint creation between me and my co-host, but I've always wanted to dissect some form of literature,
Yes. Yeah. I'm smiling because a few years ago, I wrote a children's book, and my idea, and it's still sitting in my drawer, and I think it's more or less complete. And there's so much like suggestion and analogy and you know, double meanings within the tale. And I wanted to write, my idea was to write the fairy tale on one side, but the psychological interpretation on the other as you go through each page. And so, yeah, wouldn't that be a great idea? Yeah, and I'm sure somebody listening might want to run with that, because I think there's definitely a space for that, and this is the direction I wanted to take it. So to be very transparent with, as you're doing in your podcast, you're dissecting and you know, making interpretations of the meaning and the symbolism. Wouldn't it be lovely to be able to offer that in a hard book copy almost, or even in an audio format? The possibilities are endless. Yeah,
that would be great. And then, you know, even for parents and children, that would be a nice idea, that when the, you know, story time before bed, I mean, the text shouldn't, if it's not too difficult, parents can help children understand what the meaning is, but in a child-appropriate way.
Yes, yes, yes. And also maybe even help the parents understand the meaning and the symbolism and bring the tale more to life. To open up intelligent and, well, emotionally intelligent discussions with children.
Absolutely. So it's a bit like self-care for parents as well, like parenting advice.
Yes,
you know?
yes, yes. Maybe some of these books actually don't get through to their kids. The parents just start swallow them up by themselves before and forget about them. I hope not. Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? All these different possibilities, and yeah, but please continue. I keep cutting across you.
No, that's absolutely fine, Matt. It's fine. So coming back to where I see the podcast going. After Roald Dahl, I think after this one, I think we want to try and branch out a little bit. I see it going in the same direction.
Yes.
Into, you know, disseminating knowledge to the lay person, but perhaps adding some further sort of material in. So I do a lot of dream work with my patients as well, if it's appropriate for the person.
Yes.
I'd like to do that because I think that, I mean, I'm very Freudian in that way. Dreams are the right door to the unconscious.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, so that's the that's the vision. I can so see you playing this out and living this out, and what a fabulous idea. I know your primary interest is imparting knowledge, and you know, we talked about this concept before before we started this episode today, about edutainment, this concept of edutaining, you know, sort of imparting knowledge, but you know, playfully, and you know, and you know, making it come to life, engaging people on different levels. And so I forgot where I was going with this. Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, all these fireworks going off, and let me see if I can catch my thread again. Oh, that's it. You know, I'm very mindful that a lot of our viewers are also interested in leadership development and entrepreneurial development, and yeah, and that's it. So your primary goal, it seems to me, is to edutain, is to educate, to share knowledge, and so what would you say to the entrepreneurs listening to this show in terms of getting ideas off the ground? Because the idea behind your podcast started a long time ago. I think it was inspired by recent events. But how did you get like thoughts into action? Because many people have great ideas, really wonderful ideas, but they never see the light of day in terms of being acted out.
Oh, yes, that's right. So you're actually, what you're asking is that how have I, or how should one translate their thinking, their ideas, like you're saying, into something concrete? Like, how does it actually get done?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thank you. That's a lovely reframe. And so, yeah, what advice would you give?
well, okay, let me, so I'm going to take a bit of a detour before actually coming to like the tips I would give entrepreneurs.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
So anything, you know, and I'm going to sort of, I'm not sort of pressing my own philosophy on people, of course, but this is just something that I hold, you know, it's very dear to me. Whenever something, because when you've got an idea, we could even call it a dream or a vision, or, you know, and a lot of people who perhaps engage in avoidance, they have a lot of ideas, but they have self-doubt, maybe they're low in confidence, they feel they can't execute it, they can't put it into action because they're not good enough, and so on and so forth. Is that, you know, life is a compromise between fate and free will. So it's almost like whenever I have an idea or an approach, or if I have a life goal, like my podcast, I've got to actually it's not going to happen without my energy, of course, because we've got free will. But that's also a believer, and of course, you know, this can be criticized by anyone out there, which is fine. But there's also fate. There's also a certain readiness for the universe to make it happen. And so it's a bit like, so the opportunity, like I had this idea, but I never had anyone appropriate in my network until I started to supervise some, there's a female therapist who's graduated, and she's been in practice for a few years. And I actually sit and reflected for a while, and, you know, thought, well, would she be somebody who I could, you know, we could both get on very well and do it together? Does it align with both of our interests? And so that bit I see as the universe, sort of the opportunity, the fate, if you like, you know, that an opportunity presented itself, but it was up to me whether I put it into action. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. And there's something about readiness as well, isn't there? It's being presented to you at the time of your readiness. Because, you know, these opportunities must have been floating by us before, but we didn't see them or we didn't hear them. There's something about readiness. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's a combination. You've got to be very driven yourself.
Yes.
You know, and feel, you don't have to feel like perfect. No, but it's not a perfect thing for anybody. But driven, but also I would say, so coming to the tips now for entrepreneurs is, there's a technique or strategy that I use with some of the people that I work with as well, called, I think you'll know about this, Matt, as well. It's, you know, when you do time projection, you project yourself to the future. So you imagine, so like for me, it would be imagining me sitting and actually recording an episode, imagining what that would look like, what I would be wearing, what I would be saying, and then noticing how that feels. Am I passionate? Can I really see it happening? Have I got all the tools I need? How do I feel in myself?
Yes.
And some people, like, it's a bit like, you know, people struggling to lose weight, and you can put pictures of when you were slim on the fridge. Yes. And you just visualize. So a lot of visualization, I think that would be my top tip for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and it sounds like your tip is even more nuanced as well. So it's, yes, using visualization, and I really like what you said about, you know, like testing the vision out, seeing how it feels when you run the narrative through your head, or you play out the vision. You know, does it sit? Do you feel aligned with it? Do you feel sufficiently motivated to pursue this vision? Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, what challenges can come up? Are you ready to meet? Is one ready to meet those disappointments? Because we may have lots of ideas and be very sort of idealistic. But that's another tip, actually, coming to the tips bit for entrepreneurs. Yes. The second, I would say, is try and align your philosophy somewhere between idealism and realism. So realistic, like, don't set yourself up to, you know, fail. And don't set yourself up to fail. You know, and yet, you know, hold that vision. Repeat that again. It was beautiful. I love the way you articulated that. Finding that middle ground between. Yeah, finding the sort of middle. It's a very fine, delicate balance between idealism and realism. Yes, idealism and realism. Yes, yes, yes. And I guess this is where innovation lies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes. And trusting in that process.
Yeah, you've got to have a lot of faith, not just in yourself, but like I said, you've got to have faith in nature, in the universe. But I mean, I'm very biased here, of course, because I'm very drawn to astrology and planets and how, it's the saying, isn't it, that as above, so below, as below, so above. What's happening above is also happening on the planet. And the pandemic even happened, there are certain things that's happening in the cosmos. We can't deny that. We're just small dots in the universe,
Yes, 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 yes. It reminds me of Nietzsche. Life is a spark between two voids. There's a great, there's something bigger at play. I'm also convinced of this. And we're just part of a small movement, a small cog in a bigger machine. Yeah.
Yes. And then the third, shall I finish off with my third?
Yes.
So the third tip I would say is always write something every single day. So if you've got an idea, you've got some innovative sort of thoughts running around in your mind, if one is doing that, is always take some reflection time every day, even if it's half an hour. And this is a bit like journaling, just write as much as you can, because when you put it out on paper, you'll be able to, it organizes one's thoughts and you can see it better. You can be detached from them. You're not so identified with them. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And when you said, even if it's just half an hour, and for a lot of people, that's a real luxury, half an hour. And I'd go as far to say, even if it's just 5 minutes,
Yes.
I think it makes a to run with your point, it makes a critical difference to be able to have those ideas expressed, cathartic, you might say, so that they're down and they become entities in their own right, because we will lose them otherwise.
True. Yes.
We feed into the dark recesses of our mind and never see the light of day again. No, I love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when would you say is the best time to do that?
I personally do my journal. I also kind of I do gratitude journaling as well as other sort of stream of consciousness writing and lots of deep reflection.
Yes, yes.
But in the mornings, I'm very fresh. So with my morning cup of tea, that's my regular routine.
Yes, yes. My energy also lies in the mornings, as a lot of my viewers and listeners are probably sick of me hearing me say right now. But I love the idea of being of journaling in the morning, or even writing bullet points in the morning, or even even if it's just 1 minute. And I would also say, for extra value, for added value at the end of the day as well.
Yeah.
So it's like two book stops just containing the day. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, Matt. I'm pleased you've said that, because I mean, this is something that I do because it's our therapeutic practice, and we kind of need to do a lot of deep introspection. But I have a dream diary where I've been analyzing my own dreams for the last sort of 2 years or so, just over 2 years. Yes. So the morning time I use for gratitude and other, like you said, bullet points and to-do lists. That's my OCD part of me, which I have. But then the end of the day is where actually, like you said, that's where I do more of the in-depth reflection on myself, like things that I've gone. I kind of I like to analyze what I might have said differently to somebody, even in my own social sphere. Like, let's say I've gone to the local shops for groceries and I've learned something about human behavior just by interacting with the shop owner. I would actually reflect on that at the end of the day and write down.
Yes, yes. And it makes me wonder. Well, I know, I believe this, that this is just as applicable on a personal level as it is on a professional level, and as an or an entrepreneurial level, and on a leadership level. These principles still apply.
They do, absolutely. And actually even more if you're a leader, because when one is leading, you kind of lead by example. And I think if your own work ethic and your character, the way you speak with people, the way you manage conflicts interpersonally, how you're emotionally balanced in yourself, that's all going to speak for itself as a leader. It's like being a parent. Anyone in an authority position, it's a great degree of responsibility, isn't it?
Yes, yes. It reminds me of some coaching I did with I've got to be careful what I say. I don't want to reveal too much, but a very well-known coffee brand. And so working with one of the CEOs of this coffee brand, and the work we did actually impacted through their own reflections, the work we did, the deeper work we did, I dare say, it affected scores of thousands of coffee farmers around the world, just from that one consultancy session, which really excites me. The impacts that we can have, when we invite somebody to either take a meta level on their thinking or to dive deep inside and explore the intricacies of their thoughts and feelings.
And actually, I would imagine, Matt, you probably felt such deep satisfaction after you just spent that one consultation, and then look how much difference it made.
Yes, it still warms me. I often think about that. When I'm questioning, we all have these days where we're feeling a bit low, or questioning our approach, and it's just one of many lovely memories I can refer. It's in my toolkit that I refer back to, and I think of all these scores of coffee farmers around the world that have actually been impacted because of the work that we did that one day. Yeah. I'm mindful of the time, and I know we need to start wrapping things up now. And so, how can people reach you, and how can people access your podcast?
Okay, so my podcast is actually available on the original sort of app that we use for it is Anchor. So that's ANCHOR. You can just go on to the website Anchor, and then you can put my name in, Dr. Farah Khalid. Or if people need to reach out to me, they can email me as well. Do I need to say my email address, or? It's up to you.
It's up to you. If you want to share that, I mean, I can add it in, on the postscript, or you can say it out loud now for people who are listening.
Yes, of course. So you can reach me, listeners, on Dr. Farah K. So that's DoctorFarahk@gmail.com. And please, you're more than welcome to just have a tune into one of the episodes, especially if you love Roald Dahl's, stories. You can find my podcast on Spotify and Google as well as the Anchor website.
On all top performing platforms, as they say. And it is anchor.com, isn't it? Is it .com? Yeah. Okay.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah.
Okay. So it's been absolutely fascinating, and I really mean that. I could go on for hours speaking with you. All the different tangents that we went off, and the ground that we covered, and the depth that we went into. Thank you, Farah. It's been a delight to speak to you.